Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here. And today, this topic has really been pulling on my heart because I talk a lot about intuition, of course, as we are here on the playground. But really, a lot of questions come to me and ask, how do we take what we learn about our intuition and apply it to bigger life decisions? And I think that's what a lot of people's bigger goal is to trust themselves on these smaller decisions so that way they can follow their intuition on some of the bigger life decisions and the bigger changes we want to see in our life. And that's what it's really about, right? Like, our intuition isn't only for the small things or only for the things that don't have any emotional weight or anything. So I want to dive into this today and share my experience on how I started strengthening that muscle of my intuition, started listening to that voice and allowing that voice to be louder in my body, and how that transitioned into tuning into my intuition for bigger decisions and how I guide my clients to do the same thing. So first off, I want to talk about decisions and what this means for people. And everyone's going to have their own perspective on what they think a big decision is. It could feel really big for you, and from somebody else looking in or just observing you is that's not a big decision. Just make the decision, right? And so I want you to honor what feels big to you. And for me, some of the indicators that I look at as considering things a bigger decision is the emotional weight, and also the consequences that come with it. So every decision obviously has a consequence. We teach this to our kids. We probably were taught this when we were growing up. And you either have this, I want to say reward consequence, but essentially there's outcomes of all of our decisions. There's things that happen. There's things that shift timelines from our decisions. So different things occur after. And whether we connect it or pinpoint it to making a specific decision, we know that there's things that are going to shift and change if we're in this habit of making decisions that aren't consistent or the same as what we've done in the past, which is a huge thing when you start listening to your intuition. So tune into, what does it feel like when you're making a big decision? How do you measure that? Because it's going to be unique to you. No judgment on what feels big to you. And so don't look outward, because a lot of people might say this is a really big decision, deciding where you want to live or where you want to go to school or what you want to go to school for, or maybe changing a job or trying to have a kid or adopting or whatever, right? Those these big decisions, being in a relationship. But there's also things that are I have my perception of what's big. So I don't even want to say this or that might not be big for you, but some people might feel this decision is just so certain for me that it doesn't feel big. And so tune into what feels big and what doesn't feel big. And I want you to pay attention to the emotions involved in that. And oftentimes, I don't want you to measure it by the fear either, because there might be fear that comes along with making a decision. And so just recognize that fear and then come back to the decision, because the fear oftentimes is associated with what comes after making that decision. So getting really clear on how you want to use your intuition and what you aspire to tune into, because some people really love using their intuition for everyday things. And then when it comes to bigger life changes or transformations, there's this big cutoff or hesitancy. And that's where we know we can come back and say, let's build some more trust. So why? Why do we even want to use our intuition when it's this big? And if you're here, you probably already know this, but all the little decisions that we make that we want to follow our intuition with, we want to say I picked out my outfit today completely off of intuition and I feel great. I ate intuitively today and this is how I feel, right? You might have experimented a little bit with what it feels like to make small decisions based off of your intuition. This is like the magic. This is like the potion that you put into the tea. And taking that and moving it to bigger decisions, more impactful decisions, maybe bigger emotional decisions. Think of that as like drinking the tea. Okay, so all the little decisions that you make all add up. And I'm a firm believer, like, it's in all the little things. And what I mean by that is like all the little times you're following your intuition is actually building that trust for you to say, I know I can trust myself because I've made all these decisions. I have proof. My brain wants proof. I have proof of making all these decisions based on my intuition. And now I'm ready to drink this tea and follow my intuition in this, what feels like a big decision. And so big picture, zooming way out, right? What feels like these big decisions. So you've done some thinking now of like, this is a big decision that like, I don't know if I could trust my intuition on, like, should I trust my intuition on? And I want you to zoom way, way out and like, just think like, what are the fears of the other side of this decision? What are the fears of listening to my intuition? I would guess if you're listening to this and you're sitting with a big decision, you've already heard your intuition. And so this is a matter of surrendering and trusting yourself to actually listen. And what happens when you practice with making little decisions, and if you haven't observed this is something you want to pay attention to, but the more you listen to your intuition, the louder that voice is. The more you listen to your ego or fear or other people, the louder that voice is. So if you're jumping right into a big decision or a big emotional decision and you're like, I don't know if I should listen to my intuition, I don't even know what it's saying, like that might be an indicator to do some more sitting, to like dig into that, maybe use some outer authorities. This could be your ego, this could be talking to other people, getting more information, and then coming back and asking yourself and connecting with your intuition, right? So like sometimes bigger decisions, it might not be as loud as a voice coming from our intuition because the fear drops in. So the fear is also talking. So get curious about those fears. And when you're doing this, zoom way out. I keep saying that, but like, is this a decision that I can see different outcomes from? Is this a decision that is going to alter something in my life that I can't change my mind about, that I can't pivot and shift with? Okay. So some people, let me try to think of an example. A relationship. Maybe there's been some indicators in your life that this relationship is either ready to transform or maybe phase out of my life. And you're not clear on that yet. And that's perfectly fine. And so you want to tap into your intuition and decide, what is my next step? And so if you're faced with that decision, I imagine there's some fears along with that. Like, what is this other person going to think if I approach them with this conversation? What's going to happen if I decide that I no longer want to commit to this relationship? What's going to happen if I present like ways to change and transform this relationship? And of course, a fear of what's going to happen if I release this relationship, like what comes next? And that's where you can really tune in and say, okay, these are the fears of my ego. This is a valid fear. And I honor it because, these fears at some point, like they do keep us safe. And it's our decision to move forward on, we can tell our ego, this thank you for this fear, but I'm safe moving forward in this situation and this decision. You get to decide. The fear might always be there, but you get to decide how you want to move forward. And so thinking big picture, it's like, okay, where is this fear coming from? And how has this fear interfered in my life before? How has this fear influenced my decisions before? Because if this fear is coming up, it's probably been around with other decisions in your life. And it might even be showing up in other areas of your life too. So getting really aware of that, and then still big picture, what is it that you desire? What is it that you really want? And how is this decision influencing that, adding to that, taking away from that? Okay, there's some reflection that can happen if you're really kind of debating, like, I can't, like, how do I connect with my intuition on this? Because it feels so big. When it feels so big, I often like tell people that there's just emotions, indicators, maybe experiences that need a little more reflection and kind of like refinement in the body. There might be some love that your ego needs. A lot of people are like, shut down the fear, block it out, release the fear. And I'm very much an advocate of, like, what is the fear? Like, let's love on it. Let's welcome it in, because as much as like fears can kind of feel like they hold you back, I mean, they can absolutely hold you back. At some point, that fear served you. And so big picture, it's like, what is this? How is this fear serving me? The fear of following your intuition. Okay. There's a fine line between letting it be a clear communication from your intuition versus a clear communication from your intuition clouded by fear. You got to clear the cloud, and then you get to see the whole big picture. And it's just like, oh, okay, I see the value of listening to myself and trusting myself, and really this series of decisions that happens in my life. So what do I want to do in this moment? And there's no right or wrong, right? So step one for all of this, I talked a lot about reflection, just kind of deciding like where you're at with trusting yourself. But step one, so if you find yourself, or like, I don't know, I feel like my intuition is telling me this, but I'm just not ready. Okay. Accept yourself, accept that position that you're in right now. And then let's take a step back and say, where can I build some more trust with me and my intuition? Because she's waiting for you to be like, I trust myself. I trust you. You build that trust by practicing on less impactful decisions. So whatever feels big, take a step back from it. And if it feels that big, and if it's something like that you feel like is also urgent, then, you know, you got to do your best, right? Like if you're having to make a decision, you got to do your best. But if you have the time and space, then step back and go back to those decisions that you can do every single day that help you build that trust. And you got to pay attention. If you listen to your intuition, like, I mean, one, you got to pay attention to listen to your intuition, because you got to recognize a voice. It's different from all the fear and all the conditioning. So you got to pay attention to your intuition anyway. But then as you're doing this, as you're experimenting and you're like, I want to build this trust, so I'm going to mindfully make decisions by listening to my intuition, then what happens after that? What does it feel like? What does it look like? How are other people receiving this? How are other people empowered by this? Like, there's so many things. So this could look like what you eat in a day, what you wear, okay? And asking yourself, why do I wear this? Like, if you find yourself like just on autopilot, slow down a little bit. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why do I always wear this type of clothes to work? Why do I always eat this in the morning? Maybe it's great. Maybe you want to keep doing it, but get really curious, ask yourself why, and then start making decisions by following your intuition. And when you start with those little things, like what you eat, maybe how you drive, like your route to work or to take the kids to school or daycare, little things that it's just like, this is a pattern or a routine that I'm in, and I'm recognizing this, but like, what would happen if I'm not? Okay. And then ask yourself those questions. Ask yourself to make these decisions after you get a little bit curious and you're like, why do I do it this way? I'm going to ask myself, what do I want to wear today? Do I want to take this street or this street today? Okay. And there's so many ways your intuition can talk to you. So be really open and mindful and build that trust. It starts with building that trust on the small things. I guarantee it. You're not going to trust yourself on these things that feel so big if you don't trust yourself to make a decision daily on like what you want to put in your coffee, what you want to put on your face, right? Okay. I've already said this, but you gotta pay attention. Get familiar with how your intuition likes to be heard and how you connect with your intuition. So there's so many different ways. There's all the clairs, right? All the psychic senses. There's your spirit team. There's all these ways that you can connect with your intuition. Oracle cards, tarot cards, your human design authority, and everyone's different. That's why I always recommend starting with the small things, because I can't tell you how your intuition likes to be heard. And that's something that really, like, you got to experiment with and figure out. I could probably be told, like, I could help guide you to find that, but it really comes down to experimenting, seeing how things feel in the body when you start making these smaller decisions. And I recommend writing in a journal of, like, at the end of your day, or even throughout your day if you have the time and space, but like, what decisions did I make today? Did I make these decisions from autopilot? Did I listen to my intuition? Like, did I slow down enough to ask myself the questions and listen for a body response? That's often a thing that people like skip over. They're like, I didn't really make any decisions today. And I'm like, well, you did make tons of decisions today, but you weren't intentionally asking your intuition or like connecting with your intuition because you were on autopilot. So really removing yourself from autopilot is like a big step. Now, doing that like completely is probably going to be very challenging in the beginning, but I'll tell you, like, it gets to be fun. This is why I have named my podcast The Intuition Playground, because it's literally fun to just slow down and be like, what do I want right now? I do this with food all the time because I am very comfortable like eating the same thing all the time. Like, I could have the same lunch all week long and be completely satisfied. But when I started experimenting and just saying, like, I'm throwing this out the door, and I'll do this like every so often, because like sometimes I do prep and like I plan things, but I will just throw everything out of the door and I'll stand there and I'll say, what do you want to eat? Like, what do I want to eat? And like something will pop in my head, or I'll hear it, or I'll see what it is, and I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense, but let's try it. You know, like, I would have never guessed that I would put this meal together, but let's try it. And my experiences with this is sometimes I eat the strangest things, but what happens is that meal is usually more satisfying. It's giving me different nutrients than I probably would have just jumped to. And so I think about, what colors am I eating? What nutrients am I getting from this? And I reflect, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, where am I at in my day? Where am I at in my healing? Where am I at in my relationships? And like, what energy do I need? And it's usually right there on my plate. I do a lot of intuitive eating like this, where it's like, what nutrients and food do I need right now to support me where I'm at? And your intuition will guide you. So it gets to just be so fun, because your intuition will lead you to more knowledge. Like, a lot of people will think of intuition as like your own knowledge, and like that's what you live by, and it is. But what's interesting is your intuition is actually guiding you to become more self-aware. It's like guiding you to have more knowledge. And so that's why your intuition gets louder and more clear and almost easier to follow. So start with the small things. Pay attention, please. Like, you got to pay attention. You got to journal. What decisions did I make? Did I follow my intuition? Was this an autopilot? And hey, like, no, don't beat yourself up because this isn't necessarily always easy to do, especially if you got like other people you care for, you got multiple jobs, you got multiple responsibilities, you play all the different roles. I challenge you to your first role being the ruler, the main character, right? Like the role player of your life. And it gets really fun and exciting when you let your intuition talk. And as I mentioned before, like I let my fear talk too. I let other people's opinions, I let those things be heard. But that did come after I was really comfortable with what my intuition sounded like. And actually part of that was like, is this my intuition? And then getting curious, like, well, what's my fear? Or like, what's the other voice that I'm hearing? Okay, you almost need that contrast to know. So that's where paying attention really comes in handy. Okay. Transitioning to bigger decisions. What does this look like? There's no like checklist. I don't believe in checklists when it comes to intuition, because you're going to know when you're ready to just jump, to say, this is a decision I'm making. And I know that because I know that. I know that because that's my truth. And maybe you say, like, I know that because my intuition tells me, like, however you say it, right? You know it. And when it comes to bigger decisions, there might be some hesitancy. Let that fear talk. Thank it for being there. Okay. Because the big decisions, like, you're not going to use your intuition for these big life decisions, maybe emotionally charged decisions, if like you're not practicing and being confident with the little decisions. Like, you're never even going to think about it. Oftentimes when people come to me and they're like, I want to make this big change, but I don't really know how. And then we'll get to talking and they'll literally tell me exactly what they want to do. And then I can hear their fears. I can hear the voices of all the people in their life. And so it's really about coming back to yourself. Like, that's a lot of what we do. And in my sessions, it's like, let's ground back in yourself. Because there's a lot going on up here that's connected to other people, your environment, the opinions of others. And so oftentimes you do know what you desire. And when it comes to big decisions, there's fears of what that's going to look like. The challenges, not even like necessarily outside, but like, what does that mean for you? Like, what would you have to let go of? What do you have to change in your routine, your lifestyle, your habits, if you make this decision? Okay, so getting really curious with like, what are some of my big fears? What are some of the big challenges I can see by making this decision? Okay, this all comes when you've already, like, your intuition has already talked to you when these thoughts are coming. I want you to know that too. Like, your intuition, it's not shut off. It's not too quiet. Like, I mean, it might feel too quiet, but like, it's there. And the matter is quieting down all that other stuff. But sometimes, like, you can't get that quiet. Like, you can't lower the volume on all the fears and all the other people's opinions and stuff and the challenges that are going to come with that until you look at it and you say, okay, I see you. You know, I see this fear. And at some point, this fear served me. At some point, this thought served me, or the fear of this challenge might have served me. But right now, I'm choosing to not let it hold me back. And you can literally ask your intuition again at that point. Like, what is this? What do I desire? Like, what is my decision in this? What's my intuition saying? Like, invite that voice in after you've done some of that clearing. A lot of that clearing is going to feel heavy and dense in the beginning. And the more you do the little decisions, it's not going to feel as dense. The more and as you start making these decisions through your intuition, like some of the bigger decisions, it's not going to feel as like such a weight, or like, I don't even want to say burden, because it's not a burden at all to like recognize that oftentimes we make these big decisions based off of our fears. Okay. And so you're strengthening the voice, that you're turning up the volume of the fear. And so what we're doing is we're turning it down And as you're turning it down with these smaller decisions, your intuition's getting louder because you're like, oh, she's listening to me. I can be louder. I'm going to share my voice more. Think about that in your own life. If somebody is really good at listening to you, don't you feel comfortable going and talking to them? Whereas if somebody, like, you go and talk to them and they're always like interrupting you, or they're always talking, like you're finished talking and then they start talking about something that's involving them only and not responding to you, you're probably not as likely to go talk to them. It's the same as your intuition. Your intuition is going to be louder and say more the more you listen and the more you act on it. Okay. Like, I sometimes listen to my intuition and I acknowledge it and I still decide something different. That's fine, but that's not going to really increase that strength and that muscle or the voice of my intuition. So strengthening and like raising the volume on your intuition. Then as these bigger decisions come up, know that through my experience, I've noticed is like the bigger the decision, the bigger, like the louder the noise is. And you probably recognize that and feel that in your body already. But just because it's all a bunch of noise doesn't mean you don't have the same ability to turn the fears down and raise the volume of your intuition. Okay. So this is the process. This is like the scale that's going to happen. Your fears, the fears are there, right? The fears are there to help us, to guide us. They're indicators that keep us safe. Like, fear is a great thing when we use it in a healthy way because it really is there to keep us safe. Now, there's a point where we transcend all these fears and say, I'm still going to do what I desire to do, and I'm going to listen to my intuition. So it's really this whole process of practicing, experimenting with smaller decisions, and then you're just going to know. Like, when a big decision comes and you're like, I already know what my intuition's telling me. I already know what I want to do. And now I'm going to work through this process of, what does it look like to go do that, to go be that, to act on it? So oftentimes people will get really good at listening to their intuition and like being highly intuitive on these smaller decisions, smaller, like not as impactful decisions. And it feels so good, but then it's like the weight of a bigger decision, the loudness of the bigger decision. It's like, I'm just gonna do what feels comfortable. Because I'll tell you, like, when you start listening to your intuition, things are going to change. If you haven't been listening to your intuition, if it's not a strong muscle and you start down on this journey, things are going to change. Habits are going to change. There's going to be shifts, because I guarantee your intuition is going to lead you to things that you haven't done in the past. It's going to change things that you've been really committed to. And it might feel very confusing to not just you, but the people around you too. And so there is this weight and this loudness that comes, especially with big decisions, right? Like, you can decide what you want to eat with your intuition because it doesn't really affect anyone else. And when it starts affecting other people, that fear volume tends to get really loud. So just be aware of that and know that your intuition voice, or however it's presented to you, is still just as loud. Like, it can be turned up. So eventually it's going to feel like, oh crap, I know what my intuition is saying. And I know that my fear is very, very loud right now. So I get to decide how I want to tell this story. I get to decide like what happens next. And sometimes when I'm really like, if I'm like on like this pendulum of like, I follow my intuition until it's hard. Okay. That's inconsistent energy. And so it's not going to feel as fluid. It's not going to feel as empowering, maybe. I don't know if that's true. Like, for me, that's not true, but like, I want to think for other people, it might not feel as good to know, like, okay, I can hear my intuition, but it doesn't make it easier, right? Like, listening to your intuition is not about making things easier. It's about making things more aligned for you. And the reason why it's not easier is because we've been conditioned to have these patterns, have these routines, stick to what we've known, stick to what we've been taught. And when we start listening to our intuition, that requires us to do things differently. And a lot of times people don't want to stick through that because they can't explain their intuition. They can't explain, like, this is why I want to do it. And this comes back to boundaries. This comes back to just complete self-trust and knowing, like, I don't need to explain my why. I can decide and be honest with myself and show people that I trust myself. Show my intuition. I trust myself. And it's going to feel like a leap of faith at times. But it comes back to this knowing that this is what my intuition is guiding me to. And if my intuition's guiding me there, I have the trust, I have the support and the guidance that I know is going to come through. It's there. It's there. So I wanted to also touch on making big decisions. As you start making bigger decisions using your intuition, a lot of people will ask me, like, what does it mean to second guess? And what do we do when we're second guessing or like wanting to change our mind? So I want to talk about the difference of the two, of like second guessing and then deciding to change your mind or making a new decision. Okay. Because changing your mind is a decision. So second guessing, we'll start with second guessing. Second guessing is an indicator of the lack of trust. So we second guess if we've committed to something and then things kind of feel like kind of sticky, or like, oh, I didn't know this was going to come up with this decision. And so then you kind of start second guessing of like, did I do the right thing? Is this really what I want? I didn't think it was going to look like this. Am I sure I did the right thing? I'm sure we've all had those thoughts. This is a form of protection. It's a form of fear, essentially, that your mind uses to make sure, like, you're doing something unfamiliar. Are you sure this is the path you want to go down? So really just honoring, like, okay, what part of me is second guessing? Is it my ego? Is it, my emotions, because I'm feeling the emotional impact of this decision on other people and it's like amplified back to me? So there's so many ways that this energy could come to you for second guessing, and you just have to honor it and say, like, is this me second guessing? And just kind of like recognize that this is another part of me that can be healed to be transcendent into self-trust. Or is this an opportunity to look at a new decision? Oftentimes, more times than not, the second guessing is that fear that you can just look at in the eye and respect it and send it some love and release it. Okay. We're going to have, like, no matter how successful, how rich, how whatever you are, all the things, like, fear doesn't go away. Okay. So the second guessing comes from that fear still having that voice even after you make a decision. So what you've already had practice doing this, right? Like, what you did when you made the decision through your intuition was you turn that volume down. Second guessing is living in the past. And you made that decision in the past, and now you're here. There's no second guessing on that decision. If you need to, you can decide to make a new decision. So if you're listening to your intuition and you find yourself in a position where you're second guessing, it might be an indicator that there's another decision to make. It might be an indicator too that it's not fully integrated. Your decision isn't fully integrated. So oftentimes, like, our intuition will tell us something or like lead us to something, and then we're like, yeah, we're gonna do that, and we start to step into it, but we don't fully step into that decision. So the second guessing starts kind of in that in between. So that's where I say, you got another decision to make. Are you gonna get your other foot in the door, or are you gonna retreat? And there's nothing wrong with this phase, right? Like, this phase of second guessing, I would say, like, the more you follow your intuition, the second guessing, like, really goes away, in the sense where, like, it will drop in for me, but I don't have to, like, it's not effort, it's not anything else besides me acknowledging it. And then just, like, sometimes I will decide, like, Okay, I recognize the second guessing. My ego is saying you still have an opportunity to get your foot back inside. You don't have to walk out that door. And it's really, that's the part where people get tripped up and they're like, oh, no. And so that leads back to your intuition kind of quiet, right? You're quieting your intuition. There's nothing wrong with that. But that is something that's like gonna come up after you make decisions. That second guess is gonna come up. Doesn't mean you weren't listening to your intuition. It doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you have another opportunity to make a decision on, do I want to keep one foot here? It's basically like the visual that I'm getting right now is like the second guessing is like you're trying to keep one foot here and you're trying to like see what the new room is like that you're stepping into, but you can't get a great view. And so like you're trying to reach in, but like your foot's still back here. And that's the second guessing. So the decision is really like, okay, you're going to second guess this back to how you were, or are you going to step through that door so you can look around the corner and see how beautiful this new room is? I like that little analogy, but it does not mean anything about your intuition. Second guessing is your ego doing what it needs to do. Like it is, but the less you fear the second guessing and like the more you sit with like, oh my God, did I do the right thing? Like that second guessing energy, know that it's contributing to fear. Like it's not strengthening your muscle. So it's okay to have that second guess drop in. It's a matter of what you do with it once it's there. And there's no right or wrong to step back into that room that you were about to step out of, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. It might be that that's your intuition talking to you and there's another door for you to walk through. Okay. Timelines are shifting all the time. Every decision you make, timelines are shifting. And so as you're following your intuition and you're like, this is where I want to go, but then like you get a few steps down and you're like, I'm hearing something else. And it doesn't even always have to be like a step back, right? It's sometimes like just turn over here and there's another door and that's your intuition. So really breaking that down of, is this second guessing out of fear or is this another opportunity? And listen to your intuition. Allow your intuition to guide you through that second guessing. Okay. I think that's it for now. I feel like this is a lot of juicy kind of substance to get you going to move from the everyday little decisions to bigger decisions with your intuition. And I'm really excited. So if you are in this process, experimenting with this, let me know how it goes and if this was helpful. And I'm going to pull some cards. I feel like we're doing some shape shifting, right? Lots of transformation. End of the year, I'm recording this on winter solstice. And I have a oracle deck for shapeshifters. And I think that was very appropriate for us in this topic today. So I have, Dragonloom Garden. Let me see. Okay, yep. This is number 45, and below it says a new world is born. And Sacred Beetle Armor. This says you have a mighty shield. So this is about protection and support. And Fiona and the Unicorn, the gift of sacred sight. Ooh, I like that. Let me see what they have like red eyes. There's a unicorn, for those on the podcast, a unicorn and Fiona here. They both have red eyes, which I'm looking at the other ones now. Blue and green. Okay. Yeah. The red eyes to me is like having the sight of what's grounding you. And whenever I'm talking about intuition, I'm like, you're grounding in yourself. Like that's the truest form of self-love, is grounding in yourself and knowing what it is that you desire and knowing how to listen to yourself. And so this card, it's like the gift of sacred sight, being able to see within, being able to connect with your intuition, connect with yourself, and trusting that like this is coming from a grounded form of love. Like it's so beautiful. Okay. So we got, the garden, beetle armor, and a unicorn. I'm just going to kind of like see what comes through. I haven't used these cards in so long. Okay. I pulled one more card. The delicate fairy and her ferrets. These cards are so beautiful. If you're listening on the podcast, you might have to hop over to YouTube because the cards are amazing. But this card, number 24, change is natural good, and yes, it can hurt. So all of these cards together, I think about this like sacred space that you're going to step into. And it's so unique to you. It has all your favorite plants and flowers and animals. And you're really creating this sacred space for you to come in and get really clear. And like, there's nothing you have to worry about when you enter this sacred space, right? It's yours. And you come in and you just feel so protected and held to really explore. Maybe you get down on your hands and knees and you're like, what does this ground feel like? What does it feel like to feel secure, to feel love, to feel joy? What's it feel like to express my sadness, to express my anger? What's it feel like to get really honest with myself? Okay, so like there's this opportunity for you to have this space to be brutally honest with yourself, to clear out, I'm getting like clear out the clutter and know, and then like these things will be illuminated of like, this is no longer my truth. This is no longer how I want to move forward. This isn't, like there's going to be all these like illuminations. And what I'm hearing is like, you already have access to the sacred space. It's you. It's like your body. It is every piece of you, mind, body, and soul. And what they're saying is like the mind serves its purpose. Your physical body serves its purpose. And the connection with your soul serves its purpose. It's all connected for this experience in this life. And I'm coming back to like the red eyes and like this sacred sight. It's like sometimes we can get so out in the clouds and we can get so in the future and dreaming. And it's like the sight you need is within. It's within you. It's grounding within you. It is listening to yourself, giving all the voices a time to be heard. The ferret card, the delicate fairy and her ferrets. I'm seeing the ferrets as like different voices, allowing your fears to be heard, allowing your intuition to be heard, allowing things from your body to come up. Don't ignore it, right? And the fact that change is always happening. And it says change is natural good. And yes, it can hurt. What they're saying is like there's harsh truths that are ready to be heard, and they feel harsh because it's almost like, I can't believe that. I can't believe I've been committed to that. I can't believe I've believed that. like, all right, it's almost like a wow, like an aha moment. And they're saying the time for you to dive into those, the time for you to receive these truths and kind of face that ickiness or maybe that pain within you is now. And know that like if you're invited into that, like you're so held and supported. It's time, and it's like stepping into that, you're creating a new world, you're creating a new reality for yourself, you're shifting those timelines. So these cards are beautiful. This is a new world is born, the Dragonling Garden. And the sacred beetle armor, it's just like once you start stepping into your own true desires and your own listening to your intuition, it's like you're really creating a sacred, you are a sacred being, but like you're showing up as that. And when you do that, it's like you're protected because you're honoring yourself. all these cards actually, all these cards have animals on them, and all of them just seem like they're so supported. Like I can't stop, like that just keeps going on repeat of like, you're not alone. It's gonna feel like the changes that you might be called to make, it feels like you have to let go of people or support in your life. It feels like maybe that's what you might have to release. Know that that's going to be replaced. Like there's like you're always supported. And if your intuition is guiding you to things that need to change, and when you recognize, okay, this change is going to then lead to a release of this, know the release is opening up for more and better. I can play that on a repeat all day, but okay, those are our 4 cards. I am going to leave you at that today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment or review and just share with anyone who you think might find this helpful. And of course, you can always share on social media. Tag me. I'm at Hermit and Heal on Instagram. And yeah, I think that's it. A deep breath. Okay. I will talk to you all next time on the Intuition Playground.